Thank you, MC. Welcome back. This shows that the lunch is very, very good. But one thing that I would like you all to know is this session 3, is very, very important because I only catch 4 words. Number 1, sustainability. Number 2, after lunch. What else? An important part, the last word is future. So if you are in this session, congrats, because we are not going to focus it past. Past is glory, pat your shoulder, good job. Today, this is what we're actually having right now. We are going to talk about future. We're going to talk about tomorrow. Yeah. With us, there's actually 3 speakers. I'm very, very proud and happy as well. You know what? We are going to touch in a very, very different angles. Yeah, we have, first, we have Georg. So, for information, a lot of people tell me as a moderator, no need to read out their CVs. I agree, but there's important points that I would like to point out. So the first speakers that I would like to actually shed, AR or architect Alif. He studied architecture at the University of Sheffield, UK, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and he was the first class honors and recipient of the Gold Medal Student Award from UKM. Guys, he is here with us from Malaysia. Round of applause, please. So before he joined VERITAS Architects and Berhad, he worked with several award-winning practices. That's very, very important. And it's displayed in the Royal Academy of Arts, UK. This is the reason I said I'm proud. Yeah, I'm proud to be with a session with him. Yeah. What else? He's also a corporate member of Malaysia Institute of Architects and Green RE Manager. So he joined VERITAS at the end of 2013. And there's one thing that I would like to emphasize. Again, I'm not going to read because you have those CVs with you. There's one thing that I would like to emphasize. He actually focused stratified developments for super high rise. Those that more than 50 stories and more. Imagine we have Malaysian doing this. And he's also helped a lot of famous companies like Escort, SO Sofitel, Jumeirah, Marriott, Accor, etc., etc. So today we are going to listen from him. I think he will be the first speaker. Now when we actually reach the session, I will introduce the speaker again. What he will think, what is the future, right, in terms of sustainability, technology, innovation. At the end of the day, we are going to focus on future. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Architect Alif.
Hello. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So it's actually an honor to be invited here, especially with my fellow distinguished speakers. And also thank you for the kind introduction. Usually after lunch is the hardest to start with. The momentum has been broken. So now to regain that, and this is more of a, I would say, more of a younger topic. We're looking at the future rather than looking at the past or what has happened previously or even in the current economic situations right now. So in terms of the topic, in terms of sustainability, innovation, and technology, so I'll break it down into parts that is probably easier to fathom, especially with the full stomach. And so I'll start with, in terms of the easiest to discuss is on the environment issues, or rather the green rating issues. I think earlier in the morning session, Datuk Sri Fateh has already highlighted that there's no actual incentives for buildings to go more than certified or gold, because there's higher costs, but there's not much incentives for people to buy or purchase. There's no added advantage. So in terms of this green rating, especially for housing, it's really essential that we focus on getting the either gold or platinum rating. And this is where the government comes into the picture, where you do need this incentive to be given out. We discussed whether gold, we can have a higher pro ratio, but higher pro ratio also does not automatically means more profit. We also have to tackle higher pro ratio with probably lower car park. We all can agree that car park requirements are actually is a big added cost to the development. So higher plot ratio and also incentives to the purchaser to actually make sure that there's, in terms of interest to buy green-rated products. And going back to Singapore, seems in the morning session there's a lot of people referencing Singapore. So this is clear that in Singapore as well, there's an added advantage for you to own this green-rated product. So we should apply it in Malaysia as well. So it's a pity as well that we don't have any representative from the minister, especially on the local government and housing minister here. So, but I hope that my fellow clients, the developers, and us, the consultant, also will highlight this issue to the government. So that's the easy part in terms of green rating. So next, in terms of the sustainability issue, the first panel also highlight about the changing lifestyles post-pandemic. So in terms of this changing lifestyle that we've experienced for the past 3 years, the COVID-19 is not the first pandemic that has changed the architecture or the built industry. The first pandemic that actually has changed this landscape is actually in the late 20s and early 30s. But nowadays I have to highlight that it's 1920s, not 2020. 1920s to 1930s, there's a pandemic, especially in Europe, which is the tuberculosis, TB, or more famously known as TB. So this tuberculosis, one of the treatments or one of the ways to to reduce the symptoms is actually more natural light, a better quality of air. So this actually revolutionized the architecture and building design, and also in line with the modernist movement. So what you get is actually more glass, bigger natural light coming in. Also in terms of the volume of air, it's actually revolutionized the architecture standards. So one of the example is actually by the famous architect Alvar Aalto. This is in Finland, which is the Paimio Sanitarium. So what it's done is this is even one of the most important hospital buildings in the world at that time, where it actually changes the way you design hospitals. Rather than having it like a factory setting, you have more open windows. So this ethos or this design aesthetic actually carried over until now, 100 years, almost 100 years until now. So during the pandemic, what we've discussed and what my team and I in VERITAS, what we have cracked our brain in 2020, so we come up with this resilient design guideline. So this is to address the issues of this changing lifestyle. So what is the most noticeable change in the lifestyle, especially in condominiums, in your service apartments, in your flats? What is the number one change that is apparent post-pandemic? Okay, the most change is the lobby. What has happened to the lobby? The lobby now has become like a post office where you have a lot of delivery from all the Shoppees, Food Panda, Grab Food, Lazada, right? Every one of us bought a lot of things during the pandemic, especially online where you have nothing to do. You just want to purchase something, or even you want to purchase laptops for your kids for school, school from home, work from home, you want to buy all your mics. So the lobby actually has become like a post office where it's full of stuff that, sometimes when you want to work, you have to keep it in a holding room. So what we've envisioned that the lobby should become a larger space, or at least have a holding room equal to the size of a mailing room. to ensure that all these products are kept safely, secured, and also away from the public or the other residents. So it's not contributing to the flow of the residents. So this is one key aspect of the resilient design. Another thing that we also notice now, we propose to have a longer driveway drop-off area, because we also notice nowadays that we took more Grab, there's more e-hailing services, even packages delivered, Lala Move, all requires a longer driveway, more spaces for car park. In fact, this has actually been adopted by the BKL, if you all noticed in the recent planning guidelines. So you must have provide e-hailing spaces at the ground floor, a few number of units, depending on the size of the apartments that you are proposing. So this is two of the aspects. Another aspect that we have to look at in terms of the architectural design is the more flexible internal unit for all the apartments. So this is key to ensure that the changing usage or changing lifestyle is being adopted. For example, I'm sure there's still few offices that are still incorporating this work from home requirements. I'm sure there's more, especially on government bodies. There's also unique spaces to ensure that you have a more private area that you can do. Or sometimes you also take Zoom calls in the late evenings. For example, you go back early, you take your Zoom calls, meeting, Google Meets, Microsoft Teams. So you have these special secluded places as well. And another aspect is that we want to focus on the urban farming. So this also creates a more community level interaction. So this has also been adopted in Singapore. For example, if you look at the Kampong Admiralty, where you have a plot of land that is dedicated to your units. So you can interact with your neighbors, but also you can spend time to actually do some gardening. So this is also key. So it reduces your mental stress, and also creates forces and forge more bonding between the community or residents living. So this that aspect. One more aspect that we've all experienced, if you live in high-rise apartment, is small or to non-existent balconies. So we propose that we would require large balconies to ensure that you have spaces, flexible spaces, either to do exercise, gardening, your private gardening, or table or eating space. So this is, we also want to highlight to the local authorities that probably a lot of the local authority has different calculation of balconies, how you calculate balconies. Some use full as part of your GFA, some half, some you don't really have to include it. And it also relates to the aircon ledger. So all this, there's a guideline, but I think we need to standardize this. And we want to propose that balconies should not be part of the JFA. But this also goes back to, you can't add more walls. The problem is, once you have a balcony, then you renovate to have walls, you have more spaces. So this is what the local authority may not want to do. So this has to be enforced through JMB and MC that coming in. So this is one key, because balconies also relates back to our traditional Malaysian architecture, where you have natural ventilation coming in, and it's a pity. We have a very good weather, all the Europeans coming in, we've got all the sunlights, but we can't enjoy it. We all coop up in the apartments with air condition, which also detracts from the sustainability aspect. So we do need to have this. So there's a lot of benefits to having large balconies, and also trying to push that the large balconies should not be part of the GFA. So all these are easy, immediate steps that the authorities can implement, that we can all push for authorities to implement this aspect. It doesn't cost any money. It just costs a revision of guidelines. It could be in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, but we must push for this. Another aspect that we want to highlight, the last aspect of resilient design, is actually pedestrian or urbanized linkages between developments. Okay. This is key because it also creates walkability to the city. Again, going back to Singapore, where you have a lot of walkability and safe spaces, and also create and activate the ground floor rather than having it to just close with just lobbies and driveways and car parks. And we have successfully at least managed to do it in our Star residences, where we have the Star Boulevard activated by the retail facing Jalan Yat Kuan Seng. So we want to adopt it in our new projects. And moving on, so this is our key aspect that we would like it to be adopted and introduced more. So this is one of the future guidelines that we should adopt. Okay, so that's on the sustainability, social aspect of the agenda. So another aspect that we foresee in the future is, I think several also highlighted this previously, is on the rehabilitation of the old or about to become vacant buildings. So we have a lot of HQs in KL. We know about Maybanks, we know about PNB, EPF, they've all moved on to another places. So these buildings, these large office buildings has become vacant. So there are plans, but what I want to propose is there'll be more going out, that we should also look at this rehabilitation of the office buildings into future housing. We've been doing it before, but not, I think the BKL has adopted one building that converted into a hostel, but this has been adopted and enforced and marketed in London, for example. When I was working there 20 years ago, we've already been looking at converting firehouses, factories into into housing. And this could be part of the affordable housing. We've even highlighted this to DPKL, the authority. They've agreed with this idea. Basically, you don't need to actually add more car parks. Whatever is provided, you have to follow. Even in terms of bylaws, because it's an existing building, you can't really renovate. For example, the staircases, the width, you can't really renovate, so they allow it as long as we can provide and justify the layouts. Most important, if you want to convert into housing, is the natural lights and ventilation. So those are that we need to work on. I think we've also worked with several before on all those few options. So that's on rehabilitation. Another aspect that we need to look at is on the, I'm going back to the car park requirements. These car park requirements, actually, we've calculated all in terms of the cost. If you look at, I think the BKL is still okay, they are still forward-looking, but the other states nearby actually enforces sometimes even 3 car parks per unit, which is sometimes a bit too high. So if we all know that the current guidelines for car park is about 400 square feet, you add the construction costs per car park for podium is about, then you come up, one car park will cost about 40 to 80,000 ringgit, which is added to the housing cost, which is then added to the purchases. So this also reflects the additional costing that has been added to. So car park requirements must really go with the time. So there's some solution in the future, in the near future, probably, but I think we also need to establish that car park requirements kill sometimes of the affordable. Sometimes it makes certain developments not feasible. So not only does it not make it unfeasible if it's just on podium, but what about in basement? Okay. So basement will cost more, and it also adds more, sometimes even 100 to 200K, almost cost of affordable housing itself. Okay, so, and this car park requirement, one of the disadvantages of having more car parks is also that it creates unsafe street, urban. For example, because of the car park requirements, you need to provide like 5 to 7 of podium car parks. So it doesn't have any eyes on the street. No one can look what's happening on the street because your apartment is at level 8 and above. So it's create this people, that's why people also don't feel safe to walk around these apartments. And another issue that relates to sustainability as well, because of these car park requirements, big podiums, deep basements, also creates a permanent structure. You can't demolish because it's too costly to demolish. because you already built the foundation into the basement. So there's a lot of aspects that we should, together, we can highlight this to the related agency, and also the government to really look into this car park requirements. I understand there's also marketing requirement, but at least if it's regulation-wise, the developer can actually choose. If you want more car park, we can provide more car park, but there'll be additional costs to you. So at least we can keep the regulation. For example, if affordable housing, we can really just go for one car park per unit. But we also understand there's also another issue on social, like for low income, usually you have, strangely enough, more cars. I think as the previous forum has addressed, because of all this pent-up spending. That's on the car park requirement. So going back to the technology aspects, so we have about 4 points. One, in terms of the future, or the near future in terms of technology, we have to look at the modular and prefabricated technology. We know that there's a lot of few factories here in the Klang Valley that actually provide this modular construction, but ironically, it's also being shipped to England or even to Australia, all this modular, but we're not using it here in Malaysia because it's using steel and drywalls, but I think we should adopt it to reduce this costing. So that's modular, that's the easy part, that's the near future. Another aspect is also on the automated scripting. This is more of a design process that we've been using as well in our group, using Rhino to ensure that automated scripting is of faster design process that allows for more efficient design to optimize the views, to optimize the natural light, so you don't end up in cookie cutter apartments. But what will revolutionize this scripting has to relate back to 3D printing and as well linked to robotic and automation, because this is already been established ongoing in the Western countries. So we should also look at this technology, robotics and automation. And in terms of technology, lastly, is on innovation-wise. One of the topics that we discussed is cross-industry innovations that we have yet to look at. So cross-industry innovations, if you look at Dyson, you have most of you will have Dyson vacuums. So this Dyson vacuums actually was inspired by the sawmill factory, where they use these cyclones to clear up the dust from the sawmill factories. So this has been adopted, and also on terms of the printing press is based from the wine making process. And more closer to home is your collapsible stroller. I think a lot of us have all this, a lot of us parents have all these collapsible lightweight strollers. This actually is inspired by the airplane wheels, that collapse that goes into the airplane as it takes off. So a lot of all these cross-industry innovations has been taking place. And for relating back to architecture, construction, and property industry, probably, and linking back to the modular and automated construction is looking at how we integrate and utilize the factory of probably automobile or even aircraft industry to make sure that all this process and quality control, especially for aircraft, because they can't have any margin of error. I think another panel earlier that we're talking about leaking. So all this could probably be addressed by having this strict control, factory control, modular process. This is probably more for low-rise housing and also for affordable or medium-density housing that should be adopted. For high-rise, it's slightly a bit difficult, more for the structural wind loading issues, but it could be adapted. Another innovation, which is a pity for us, is in the timber. We are a timber-rich country that we have not really explored the use of glulam, CLTs, or even bamboo, which is our natural resources. So this is another aspect for future that we probably can look at into more detail. And there's two more that should be coming soon, is the autonomous vehicle I was in San Francisco a few months ago. They've already started this program. This company called Cruise actually has this autonomous vehicle. Autonomous vehicle is more like Grab, but without drivers, and using AI and electric vehicles to all adapt. So what this revolutionizes is it will solve on the last mile issue. We all heard about the last mile issue, where you have all this public transportation, but to connect from the station to your actual house is where it's missing. So this autonomous vehicle will probably resolve this last mile issue. It's probably not next year or 2 years. It'll probably be like 5, 10 years. You know, knowing Malaysia, it'll probably be 10 years will come back. But we all know the gestation period of a development is actually 5 to 8 years, especially for high rises. So this, we have to plan for it now before it becomes obsolete. But also, by having this autonomous vehicle, location is not much of an issue anymore. You can be slightly on the suburbs without impacting on the desirability of the development. So this autonomous vehicle also will need cooperation from the government, especially on the transportation industry. So it's all linked, and also reduces the usage. It could reduces the cost because you don't have the drivers anymore. And also all electric, so it's safe. It's easier on the environment. We know the issue on the production of the electric vehicle, but that's another issue that we need to tackle in terms of the carbon footprint of the production. But at least it reduces the emission from the cars in the city. And also lastly is, my last point is on the AI. We've talked about AI earlier. This AI is more for the project management and construction management that we have not yet adopted. I don't think it's been there yet, but I think it's coming soon. This will also link to the advanced BIM, the Building Information Modeling, that we should adopt. So this AI on project management and construction management, when it goes into tender, it will automatically reduces the time needed to do the programming. So it's all part of AI to actually look at the efficiency and logistics and programming. So this could be coming up in the next few years even. So yeah, so that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Architect Alif. Now, for myself, I think it's valuable, the design consideration, the design guidelines. You know, developer out there, if I were you, you notice that I always jot down notes. You know, later I'll give you all a summary. Beautiful. So the next person that I would like to introduce to you, the next speaker. I myself is in the technology line for more than 2 decades, touching real estate for 10 years. This is the guy you need to talk to, you need to listen to him. So the next speaker will be Georg. Georg is actually, how should I say? I just need to give you 3 points. First point is, he's instructing and he's actually have built 3 unicorns. Amazing, 3 unicorns, you know? And he's actually based in Malaysia. I'm very happy and proud as well. He says that he's Malaysian. You know, Georg, you can share with all of us later on. We are very lucky to have him. He's now the chair for Juwai-IQI Holdings. And he's also sit in the executive for Space Talk, Centerpoint Alliance, PropTech, BioHR, Made Comfy. All these are public listed company. Yeah? And if you actually heard before, Carlist.mind, yeah, some of those smaller companies started by him, right? Where at the end of the day, it's transformed to carsum.com. Yeah. So another important point that I don't want to miss out. He's also the CEO, managing director of iProperty Group, the iProperty.com, the website that you always search for properties. He's the one that actually managed it long time ago. Yeah. So without further ado, definitely he won a lot of awards. Frankly, if I read it down, I will take another 5 minutes, go through his CV. Without further ado, Georg, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Poo, and a warm welcome to everyone here. I'm sorry, I'm in Thailand today. I'm based in Malaysia, but I'm in Thailand today to speak at the global PropTech conference to talk about technology and property on behalf of Juwai-IQI, which I chair. Juwai-IQI has now become the largest real estate group as well as the largest PropTech company in Southeast Asia, surpassing also Property Guru in size, like revenue, profit, etc., etc., etc. So it's growing very, very fast, and it's using technology to disrupt an industry which needs further disruption. And I have always had a great passion for technology and applying technology on real estate, which is my second passion. And I would say we talked a lot about leading innovation and the role which Malaysia plays. When it comes to PropTech, I do believe that Malaysia has had, in certain areas already, leading companies. I mean, certainly Juwai-IQI is one of the 3 leading companies which have developed the concept of, the pure classified site like iProperty or Property Guru further, and is now fulfilling transactions online, rentals, as well as property sales. I think you've seen in the news, we closed 42,000 transactions last year of that kind. Now, greener housing, sustainability and livability, or whatever you call it, always come up. I have 3 decades of experience in the field of property. And even 15 years ago, while I was running a group out of Australia called LG Hooker, the first areas of sustainable housing came up. And because people started to see that doing the right thing is not just good for the globe, but also good for themselves. And this is a very important point. We don't necessarily always have to wait for the government to take action, because there might be situations where actually us taking action have direct benefits for ourselves as well as for our environment. Let me outline a few. With the rising fuel prices and energy prices around the world, definitely solar panels and other ways of creating greener power have become more powerful. Now, some of the portals, and we introduced this in Australia for the first time in the world 15 years ago, we introduced the ability to search by these features, to search properties for which properties have solar panel, which property have also certain feature which make it more energy efficient. We defined 17 criteria, and a few of those were mentioned earlier today, which is the orientation of the property against the sun, which was also the building material used, solar panel, etc., and created kind of a pool of data for each property, and created our own rating, because at that time Australia didn't have an energy rating for residential properties. But obviously the demand was there, because if you have a more energy efficient house, you save money. Also, if you're going to sell a house and you invest in certain features which make the house more energy efficient, then you are likely to get a higher return. And that's where also AI came into play, and we provided back then tools for people to do it. And these tools actually were sold then to the research entity CSIRO and productized and became an input into the government policies of Australia. So what can we do? I mean, we all agree that green living is important for the planet, but not just for the planet, it also helps improve the value of the property and also the livability, which is not just energy efficiency, also the enjoyment in the properties. AI can definitely help us during the planning stage, selection of material, orientation of house, sizes of room, height of properties, etc., to maximize or to minimize the environmental footprint of the property, and thereby increasing the value and the cost of running this property. More and more in countries around the world, ratings for high risk zones such as coastal dangers or bushfires or flooding, etc., are coming up. They're not yet mandatory, but savvy buyers seek these reports in order to assess if the property they're buying has a certain risk factor which needs to be factored in. Is it in a zone where there's a lot of flooding? Malaysia has seen many floods in the recent years, and certain key learnings also of the past, that you have to build houses not on the ground but on stilts, have kind of been lost. I don't know why. And as a result of that, many houses got damaged as a result of those out of these floods, which are common, not just maybe increased due to climate change, but have also been common in this part of the world. So these factors, these energy efficient features and tools, can become a differentiating factor for the owner of a property to increase the value on sale. Can also be a design factor for the property developers, and thereby give them an edge over other developers, help also enhance the brand of the developer, and last but not least, prepare the property industry for the bigger, like the umbrella theme of smart living, where the smart house interacts with the smart mobility, the car, or the shared car, which are connected, the smart government, and so on and so forth, where everything is more intertwined, is more connected, and therefore achieves a higher positive outcome for the future. There's always a bit of a risk which needs to be managed, which is data security and privacy. However, the opportunity is definitely there, because there are savings there. So we don't always have to wait for the government. We can also do certain things which already make sense, because when people say driverless cars will be a big thing, yes, there might be a big thing in places where there's a lack of drivers, but I'm not quite sure that they will be as prominent in places where there's a sufficient amount of affordable drivers, because people might choose to pay for this extra service over a completely artificial tool. And the most important bit of disruption should never be forgotten, which is it's about solving real problems. It's not trying to push out technology at all costs. So we will see in the future AI enter into the real estate industry and other industries more and more. In fact, it is there, and we often don't even see it. AI is being probably far more used than we know these days already. And it can be as simple as the tax office finding people who underdeclare capital gains taxes, or other areas where banks run models on the portfolio of their mortgages in order to spot like risks in their portfolio, where AI can certainly help, or where certain assessment of areas are done with intelligent aerial photography, which gets analyzed using AI to drive valuable conclusions for it. So to me, there's no doubt AI will solve real life problems in the property industry, and with the improvements to the quality of AI, more and more. And I do also believe that Malaysia can learn in certain areas from other countries, but has also a lot to offer to other countries, and has also proven in the past in some areas that it's really leading, and certainly the biodiversity, the energy efficiency, the climate change, etc., could be an edge for a country like Malaysia. So from my perspective, I want to keep it a bit briefer, because I do believe we are on a tight schedule, but this would be my initial thoughts. Back to you, Poo.
Thank you, Georg. Let us give him a round of applause. Yep. So we have heard about design, we have heard about technology, but how we actually do this is very, very important. Recent Madani government budget, government Madani budgets touch a lot of one thing called ESG. ESG is started by Kofi Annan long time ago, the late Kofi Annan, Chief Secretary of UN. So how can all this help us? This comes to our third speaker, Arina. Arina is actually a partner from Ernst & Young, EY, and she's actually the subject matter expert for EY ASEAN integrated reporting. Arina assists its client to integrate sustainability. That's very important. I think a lot of developers out there, as well as the government, you want to turn sustainability into a long-term strategic and operational plans. She is the SME for this. And under her leadership, EY issued a Climate Risk Disclosure Barometer 2020 Malaysia. So she as well make me proud, make all of us proud in Malaysia. And she, in 2020, 2021, Arina supported Bank Negara Malaysia, that's important. Yeah? And the Security Commission Malaysia, Joint Committee for Climate Change, they call it JC3, to facilitate capability building workshops under the UK Prosperity Fund for Asia Low Carbon Energy Program. So what is it going to do with us here in Malaysia? So what Ministry of Environment, Water, Busan Malaysia, Security Commission talks about? Ladies and gentlemen, we'll pass the floor to Arina.
Thank you, Mr. Poo and KSI for hosting this, and Tan Sri as well. So I think we have prepared some slides. I prefer to navigate through slides if that's also good for everyone. If I can have the slides up. Thank you. So I think where we want to go through is just a very brief introduction to ESG, which I think is already quite familiar for most of those in this room, but no harm to just do a quick recap. But where we want to talk about the areas are transitioning to a green future. So what are the initiatives, technologies, and innovation aside from what my fellow speaker, architect Alif and Georg have already mentioned? We want to discuss the current initiatives in pursuing the low carbon cities, regulation perspective, what's the role of technology and innovation. I think the third part is important because as we work with quite a number of banks, financial institutions, and the institutional investors, they are looking at sustainable finance, turning all these challenges into opportunities. What are the current trends in the construction, property and construction area as well? So I think in the first part, this slide actually talks about when we look at mega trends, it's a full report by itself you can find online by EY Mega Trends. What you can see is from now, next, and beyond, the focus is really now very much on technology, the demographic, but as what was mentioned, the next one is decarbonization, food by design, circular economy, remapping urbanization. We are also going to see behavioral revolution, and in the next, beyond 10 years, what's critical is powering human augmentation. We are also going to see sustainable social contract. Now, what this means is historically, a lot of the contract that you sign with your contractors, main con, subcon, a lot of it has been upgraded to take into consideration, for example, the MACC anti-corruption requirement, right? The next update or upgrade will be on forced labor. So all these will also be trickling down to the contract terms. But what we have not seen is really the advancement when it comes to what does the environment, further environment monitoring means. So for example, we will see that biodiversity is going to be an important area after emissions. So after tackling emissions decarbonization, biodiversity is the next key area. So the framework has also been starting to be developed. And we are seeing that from now, where all organizations are going from decarbonization, eventually they'll be moving to neutral and net positive. So for organizations who actually have previously have their forestry and land use, there will be different options to capitalize, such as carbon credit, looking at some of these nature-based solutions as well. So what it means is in future, potentially maintaining or improving the forestry will also be able to be a separate business ecosystem in that respect. So those are the key things, and I think what mentioned is households and individuals where priorities are now starting to be reconsidered. Now, when it comes to risk, it's important because risk will give us an indicator of where the focus would be and what are the areas to actually focus on. So on the left-hand side, you can see under the World Economic Forum, These are the by likelihood and by impact. But on the right-hand side is more critical because on top of all the environmental issues that have been highlighted, like extreme weather, flood in Malaysia, what's important is to look at the strategy. Now, if we look on the right-hand side, we will see that extreme weather events is happening in the short term within these 2 years. And it's essentially what corporates are starting to prepare their mitigation and adaptation strategy. But what we are seeing in the next 3 to 5 years are the knock-on effects. So the IT infrastructure breakdown is going to be a key concern after everyone has gone through upskill, enhancement of their IT infrastructure. They will also be looking at cybersecurity and some of these focus areas. Price stability is also going to be a critical concern. But when we look at the long-term existential threat, that's where if we see weather patterns are changing, we are also going to see biodiversity loss, as I mentioned. So all these have a trickle effect because at the end of the day, we want to know how are these going to translate to how business are operating and where would be the key position that your business wants to pivot towards. So when it comes to the transition to greener or the innovation, what are the current initiatives? What we have here, we can see that under the healthy and sustainable buildings, there is the cost reduction consideration, stakeholder expectation management, governance and regulation management, and what are the sustainable development and revenue generation considerations. So all these 6 are actually going to be the tenets to look at what healthy and sustainable buildings will be focusing on. These are the 3 things that we're seeing. Number 1, the global average building intensity needs to decrease by 30% from what it is today to reach the objective of limiting climate change to 2 degrees. So today, we are seeing a lot of the retrofits have not taken into consideration. So emissions monitoring are still not up for most of the buildings. So the second part is for opportunities to be realized in the building sector value chain, the designers, developers, contractors, owners, tenants all have to coordinate and look at what are the enabler, set the ground rule, finance the enabler, and put in the investment to streamline how these are going to drive emission reduction or energy efficiency results. So the third point is there is no singular definition on green building financing. Now that's important because there are various standards across different countries. So what's important is to come back to the fundamental. What are the labels that are being put when green buildings are being discussed? But label aside, what are the energy efficiency and intensity that the building can operate? And what are the improvement mechanisms? Keeping it simple. So when we talk about Malaysia government, they have launched the official guidelines to advocate for green transition. Now, they have the low carbon cities framework. Now, a lot have read through it, but I think the effort within the ecosystem still need to push for a performance-based system. When you talk about performance-based system, means there's a report card. And when there's a report card, it will show what are the total carbon emissions from a city performance consideration. Now, when we look at the other side for 2022, this is also to transform and move Malaysia forward on the National Low Carbon City Master Plan. So locally, the authorities are imposing greener criteria for new development. Not surprisingly, the Petaling Jaya City Council has also come up with the goals involving 10 teams, ensuring the well-being. And this is also focusing on smart, inclusive, low-carbon, child-friendly, and educated city teams. So when you talk about the important roles of technology and innovation, this is where a lot of competitive advantage will kick in if done correctly. So we are seeing at this point, the national target is to move from 638 green buildings to 1,750 by 2030. And what we're seeing is under the sustainable construction practices, there is 10 million to 50 million target public projects to achieve 70 IBS score. 14% or 10 million and above target private projects to achieve 50 IBS score. Now, all this is also going to move towards the 100% mark moving forward, targeting the private projects as well. So all these is supposed to ensure that government buildings private buildings are also having a target emission reduction in that context. So this slide is maybe just for a quick takeaway. But what we see is when we talk about technology, we put it in a structure and time frame. So when we talk about structure for green building design, the initiatives has already been there. The energy audit, conditional grant, net zero energy building targets, standardization of green rating tools, Malaysia Standard for Construction specifications, and the Center of Excellence by CIDB. So these are already the initiatives that have been put in place. Focus is really active design, MEPS, number of certified buildings, passive design, BEI. So when we see the targets, there has been structure as well, 2020, 2025, and 2030, as I mentioned. So all these will actually show what are the targeted example of appliances, and moving forward, what are the rating that will be put in place to drive these progress. Under the sustainable construction practice, there is the continuous implementation of a CITP, the financial viability of IBS through tax incentives, and the developing competencies via the COE Center of Excellence. So all these will actually towards focusing on the IBS as well. For green building materials, this is where the policy framework will need to actually drive the agile enabling of recycling of construction and development materials. So circular economy, green building materials is going to be a very rising focus as well. Raw materials recycle content. So all these are also being focused in your sector. So it's not that your sector does not have the existential focus or initiatives, but the idea is really to have the report card to actually put on the performance matrix and target and to drive the progress moving forward. So the last part I have is on sustainable finance. I think this is important because this is where your bankers, your loans, your capital provider are also going to look at. When it comes to the development trend, we are seeing huge opportunities to finance green building in the region. Of course, it's not simple. As we discussed, even with our Singapore region, retrofits are expensive and it's very hard to mobilize for a lot of REIT players. But what we're seeing is, under there, we are seeing that it is a US 423 billion market, if done correctly. And what we are seeing is focusing on emerging cities. There are already statistics on what the green building market will look like. So all these will indicate the opportunity in the region. So under the study that we have done, the ASEAN 6, looking at green and sustainable finance, it has shown that sustainable bonds and sukuk are rising. Malaysia do lead in sustainable sukuk issuance with a total of US 3.8 billion. And what we can see is the value of this is estimated to be 7 billion moving forward. So the market is hot when it comes to green sukuk. And what we're seeing is the focus is mainly in energy, green building, and transportation sector, which are the fields of play of the key leaders that we're seeing in today's conversation. So the idea is really to look at where the projects are. One thing I wanted to highlight is while a lot of these projects are focused on just solar panels, looking at some of these green infrastructure, green building, not many organizations have moved towards budget tagging mindset. So when you go towards a budget tagging, it's re-looking at your forward-looking 12 months financial projection, understanding what are the environment and ESG components. From there on, package all these initiatives and go towards a green financing agenda. The only sector that we've seen moved on this are the utility players. So the property and construction sector, to a certain extent, would need to consider moving this so that there are more projects that would qualify for green financing moving forward. So the next step, or at least the action plan to boost the Malaysia green building segment, these are the 3 recommendations for consideration. The first one is really the green building design and operation, the near zero building target and regulation by 2040. There is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act to regulate for comprehensive building energy code moving forward for labeling and also how to apply the performance standards. Also considering the building energy retrofits, as I mentioned. Now, the second part is sustainable construction practice. So it will also will still be ramping up on the IBS adoption rate via the improved procurement practices. And underneath is really the reducing and recycling the construction waste. And for green building materials, it is to look at the collaboration for cement, steel, glass, what are the emissions within those supply chain, and also to have the plans for energy efficient building, such as the MS 1525, MS 2680, to look at the increased energy and material efficiency. So these are the few key things within the sector that will be the core focus area. With that, I think, thank you for this session.
Let's give her a round of applause. To me, there's lots of info there. I hope that participant here, you already jotted it down. It's such a wonderful session. I just do a very quick summary. Very quick, just give me about 2 minutes because I respect all the speakers here. So at least this is what I actually have captured. I hope you capture much more as well. So whoever they want to ask questions, please get ready because we don't have a lot of time, but I would like to actually give a floor to participants later on. Yeah, so for Architect Alif, he shared a very important and valuable things about design guidelines. I still remember he talked a lot on resilient design. Yep, that's a beautiful stuff. Whether you want to have a holding room or whatsoever, so developer out there, please think about this. He touched about mental well-being as well. I just rephrase a little bit. That's beautiful stuff, which at this age, after COVID or whatsoever, this is a very, very important thing, which I'm very happy that Architect Alif actually touched that. And he also touched a lot on environmental. And last not least, I just want to summarize his thing, which I personally think is very, very beautiful, walkability. So if one day when we actually build our home or build our community, everywhere just within 10 minutes walk or 10 minutes journey, there'll be a beautiful world, yeah? So basically, that's actually Architect Alif. And Georg actually tells us about artificial intelligence. He shared a lot of intelligence and information that he actually experienced in Australia, as well as all his companies actually doing. He touched about sustainability, housing, green energy, how we make our energy more efficient, and as well as selection of the building material through artificial intelligence. That's very important. You can actually start thinking of this as well. So for Arina, beautiful. I'm very happy as well. There's a EY mega trends. So from today onwards, now I know I will actually go and search and learn from there as well. That's a beautiful stuff, and it's very, very valuable. She also shared about carbonization what do I write? Okay, sorry for that. Carbonization, as well as neutral and net positive thing. But important point that I would like to highlight, there's 3 points. Number one is circular economy. This is very, very true. Whatever things that we actually have built for the entire ecosystem, if we be able to put in circular economy into pictures, will definitely help our Mother Earth, yeah? And government, developer, you need to always think about IBS score, yeah, to improve the IBS score. Through this, you'll be able to help the entire economy as well as the entire ecosystem. Last not least, will be put in your budget tagging for ESG, because when you actually put in budget tagging for ESG, it will definitely help to be part of it. Yeah, so this is actually a summary for all this session. I hope that that definitely there's a lot of things I didn't mention, but this is the points that I actually captured. To me, it's very, very important. I hope that it's important to you as well. So are you all ready for a question? Maybe I'll start it first. Global world economists mentioned that 40% of the job is going to no longer exist after 5 or 10 years. So I would like to actually point this question to Georg. What will happen? Can you predict what will happen to Malaysia in the next 3 or 5 years? Yeah, Georg. From technology.
So you're saying, I don't believe this prediction, but that in the next few years, 40% of the jobs will disappear. But I do believe that it will happen in 10, 20, or 30 years. Normally, change and innovation usually happens slower because it starts much earlier than we think. when we hear about it, it's actually in most cases already many, many decades around. I mean, I worked in AI more than 30 years ago already at university. It just had different names, but the technology in principle is very, very comparable to that. But there's definitely a change and shift in certain jobs which will be less relevant, and other jobs will be created in return. And this is nothing new and has been the case in many industrial revolutions in the past. I think it's there will be far more jobs in terms of training and running and maintaining these computer systems. There will be more and more jobs in the whole area of data and how to analyze data and so on and so forth. And definitely less jobs in other more repetitive tasks. If you just think of like people who like when you buy goods in a shop, and the cash teller certainly is on the way out. There's already shops without any cash teller. So, but will it happen as fast? But it doesn't really matter if it happens as fast. But there's definitely need for experts in sustainability. I mean, right now there are not enough ESG experts out there to advise companies on what to do. There are not enough people out there who really understand the latest in building materials and so on to help everyone to build it also in the factories, etc. So overall, I do believe we will have a shortage of labor, not too many people, but with a completely different shift. Let's not forget, I mean, places like China, currently 1.4 billion people, are heading for 700 million people by the end of this century.
Thanks, George. I think that's a very important point. So participant today, you're very lucky again, you are here. So think about what will happen in the next 3 years, yeah? So the next question I would like to target to Arina. Madani's framework, touch, in the budget as well, touch about ESG, as well as the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, was radically improved the scope and existing reporting requirements of the EU's Non-Financial Reporting Directive, NFRD. Yeah? So this ambitious package will make it mandatory for many real estate organizations to report on the relevant inward and outward environment, social, and governance ESG issue. Yeah? And what will be Malaysia or even Asia context in the short-term and long-term impact?
I think what we see is Bursa Malaysia has already pushed for ESG reporting since 2015. And they have revised the reporting guideline, 3rd edition, by last year, November. In the more recent update, they have mandated that there will be 11 ESG indicators that listed companies need to report. It will cover the likes of emission, water, supply chain management, anti-corruption, and data privacy breaches. So these are the things whereby, to a certain extent, PLCs, listed company, have no choice anymore but to report, and they're asking for 3-year historical data moving forward. So there is a trend to look at performance. So we do see that in Malaysia, while all these are not new for listed company, I think a lot of the focus will be on strategy, explaining the performance. So it's no longer a one-year reporting, but the conversation that is happening on the ground is what are the real target they are going to set moving forward. Because when SC actually update Malaysia Code of Corporate Governance, they've also put forth that board of directors need to oversee sustainability strategies, performance, and target. So what we are seeing is board of directors now are really navigating, but where needs to happen is there must be a bottom-up ESG targets that management is able to carry and deliver for board to have oversight. So it needs to be a hybrid of bottom-up and top-down coordination. Now, what we don't see is really the coordination end-to-end within the operation. So in a lot of companies within what we are seeing on a day-to-day, ESG and sustainability can mean different things for different person in a company. So definitely if you're from HR, if you're from operation, if you're from the stakeholder corporate affairs, ESG could mean a lot of different things. Now, without a clear target being set on ESG, the alignment cannot happen. So that is what we're saying is going to help navigate and steer performance moving forward. But what we are also seeing in reality for a lot of the sector players, a lot of the ESG are very thematic to project level, not at a group corporate level. So the gold standard is very unclear because of variety of different types of development. And that's not, by default, variety helps to manage the customer needs. But to a certain extent, there must be a certain gold standard moving forward. For example, if you have like RF ID or you have facial recognition deployed, what would be the kind of branding of the company that's going to steer end-to-end the gold standard for all the project? So typically, that is the kind of branding that you want for a company to say that some of the technologies and enablers are going to be the way or the branding of the company, whichever development, you have a certain level of gold standard. So this is where I feel for the sector, a lot of organizations are handling the baseline foundation ESG. There will be areas like forced labor and all to manage to ensure you don't lose the license to operate. Health and safety is fundamental. But where you want to look at is when you look at innovation and technology, what is the branding you're going to have to help the company to have a competitive advantage?
Wonderful. So today I actually grab it as well. Please take note in the future of what is going to happen in Malaysia in terms of ESG. Very, very good advice, Arina. The next question I'm going to ask Architect Alif. When just now we talk about buildings and constructions, processes need to become green. Just now you touched about greens as well, and more environmental friendly. There is a cross-industry challenge for all stakeholders. What is happening in the field of, in this case, technology? It is part of our discussion and our topic, as well as regulation. How are startups, developers, even governments stepping in, and how can all stakeholders prepare for a greener future? From design perspective, yeah, definitely.
All right, thank you for the question. It's a really good question. In terms of, we're talking about the green process, right? One of the green things is actually, I think Georg also highlighted about this passive design. So this is the first thing that you need to look at is the optimization of the natural light, the views, of the ventilation, and also even the traffic flows also, to reduce the emissions. And one of the things that we see happening more and more is the usage of technology. For example, we talked earlier about the advanced scripting from Rhino, using Rhino software. But in the future also this could be adopted from the AI itself, using a programming that actually predicts the process, so that it also, what is happening mainly in Europe is also look at the materials to make use of local materials within 50 kilometers, within 100 kilometers, that could also be adopted into the software. So this is in the near future. But in terms of startups also, we see that because of this requirement of building information modeling, from the startups perspective, we can see there's more and more people actually establishing their own company, focusing on just these technologies to make sure that these processes are as efficient as possible. This also relates to most of the government requirements. Even if you want to build I recently participated in a tender from JKR to build a school, Sekolah Kebangsaan, also requires BIM. So this is where we need to go through. And I think to pick up on your earlier question to Georg on the employment rate, I see that it could be the job opening could be reduced, but I would say more entrepreneurship coming up. More people are solving issues, more startups coming up. So this could also help in terms of creating a more greener industry. And also what I highlighted earlier about the AI, integration of AI and the building process and construction techniques. All this can be integrated more together. And also on because going back to authority regulations in terms of schematic design, DO, for example, development order, we have to submit. Development order now becomes more and more front-loaded because you have to include almost everything. You have to include the strata. You have to know what the strata flow is, from the fire staircase common to limited common to accessory parcel to parcel. All this has to be captured in schematic. But because of the requirement of the development order is needed to ensure the plot ratio is increased, a lot of these decisions are actually fast-tracked. And sometimes we do dummy DOs, coming back with amendment to the DO, which also disrupts the whole process. So probably we also have to rethink with the government in terms of how we want to make this process more efficient, rather than maybe we just focus on just the plot ratio, and then the actual development order to have more time to actually develop it, to ensure that we all don't waste time. I think the earlier speakers talking about 24 to 36 months just to get the approvals. So this is also a waste of time, energy. I know one of the consultants was taking this also costs more to my company as well. Yeah, so that's one of my thoughts on it.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. So, ladies and gentlemen on the floor, any questions that is very, the rare opportunities that you can actually ask the expert here. SME, we have Georg, we have Arina, we have actually Alif. Okay, that's one. Yeah, no? Okay, yeah. Please.
I'm Khairina, I'm a landscape architect.
We can't hear you clearly. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Khairina,
Okay.
Landscape architect. Either this is my observation or just sharing my thoughts on this. Generally, what I see, I've been seeing, there's a lot of development around in Malaysia, but most of it are very site-specific. Okay, they lack consideration outside of the site, and information, GIS information, are not utilized. Are not data from that. Is either incomplete or not available, or are not well analyzed. Perhaps this could have caused all those flooding, downline flooding, or downstream flooding and stuff like that. Also affects the biodiversity, and then that's where in areas, a lot of areas, we have issues with wildlife. Now we cannot blame the wildlife. You have to remember, Malaysia is the 12th highest biodiversity country in the world, the 12th. And our tapirs, our tiger are diminishing. We only have less than 200 tigers right now in Malaysia. And we are, we are complaining they are encroaching our development. Where else is their areas? They've been there before us, and there is their route of food and stuff like that. But when development does not take into consideration of this biodiversity, where this within this biodiversity, we have ecosystem services that can serve us well, that can help us reduce the flooding or cater to mitigate our flooding. Not just that, all this biodiversity is going to provide us the quality oxygen, the quality water through all this filtration and stuff like that, and also in the end feed us. It's a circular economy in itself. So I think it would be better if proper data, I don't know where we can get that data from GIS and merge it with AI and stuff like that to come up with a better analysis of what we can do, the parameters, set of parameters, so that the biodiversity is not affected, so that we will not be affected in the long run, kind of thing. Because I also see that a lot of this development, previous and also currently, are also greenwashing this eco-development. They cut down all the trees, they plant it back, and say, oh, we are eco-development, So and then they damage everything. They damage the little streams, they damage the micro environment and stuff like that. And you don't know, there are a lot of stuff that we have yet to find out. Even our, our FRIM are still searching for information. Do you know we have, in Malaysia, and only in Cameron Highlands, we have red snails. You know that? The snail is very red, and it's and the housing is black. You don't know that, right? Okay, only available in Cameron Highlands. Now, we are destroying Cameron Highlands, we are destroying all these places that we don't know about. Still, we do not know all the information yet. And do you know all those medicines that we get through our own orang asli? That's the best medicine in the world for your breathing system, stuff like that. Only the orang asli knows. But our people just go in and damage everything and come out and sell it 10 grams for 150 ringgit. Do you know that? You know? So we have a lot in our forests that can help us back, but we are destroying on the pretext of development. Okay? And the worst part is when developer comes out and say, oh, this we are great, we are doing everything eco, stuff like that, but in actuality, all the hills, all the slope goes down, flat. And then cut all the trees, and then reroute everything just for them to feed their plant without considering outside, the damage that causes outside, not just to the physically, but also to the other people. So that's why we have all this flooding. So now how do we assess whether all this development are greenwashing that development? Thank you. Sorry for that very lengthy.
No. I mean, thanks for sharing this. I think it's important topics that all of us should think about for a better Mother Earth. Yeah. So our Mother Earth is sick now. So that's why I'm very happy. I mean, honored, to be session with all these expert SMEs here. Just want to share one thing, just a quick one. I totally agree. There needs to have some measurement. There's one project that we are doing, which is called Livable Index. Since you actually mentioned this, just to share with you, we need to measure, what type of world or environment that we're actually with now, before, after, or yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So those are actually important points. Architect Alif, you want to share something or whatever?
Okay. Thank you for the insight. This is a dilemma, actually. Part of the so-called, the bigger picture in terms of sustainable, we talk about sustainable. So the only way sustainable is to build less. But if we're building less, we will not be in this summit. So that's the dilemma that we are facing. So maybe we should, instead of build less, we should go for build smart. And that's why we highlighted about our car parks. Because a lot of these hills and a lot of lands that are being, flattened, biodiversity, mostly, I would say 80% has to do with the car park, the transportation industry. Because if you look at the way that we lived before, we integrate the biodiversity into our lifestyle. And if we can really go for this less car parks, automated vehicle, it could help to reduce this kind of so-called violation to our nature. And this autonomous vehicle, I know George may not agree too much, is that it's like, if you look at this like lift destination control system, for example, if you want to go to floor 8th floor, 9th floor, they will group us together into this one lift car. It's the same as what's happening with the autonomous vehicle. So if, for example, if you want to go to KLCC, you want to go to Four Seasons, you want to go to Avenue K, for example, they will group us into this one car. So it reduces emission, it reduces the cost of the ride share, of the ride, it reduces, there's no driver, it reduces in terms of fatigue, so, and also solves the last mile. So you don't really have to wait, I have to go to another pickup station or pickup area. So there's a lot of this AI should be integrated to resolve this issue. And also agree on your data. We do need to collect most of this, yeah, that's all.
Can I also add something to it? Because
George and Arina, you want to speak from
yes,
ESG point of view, or later, George, you want to talk about technology point of view? Maybe
I would like to add a bit to it, because I actually did some work into this, how to integrate developments into with nature. There's a great example. I think it's the island of either Réunion or Mauritius, where the government has managed to get the nature back from the ocean all the way up. So it's not just about, autonomous cars won't bring us biodiversity, What brings us biodiversity is bridges for animals so they can cross the road. So us living together with the biodiversity. If you drive through Europe, you've got bridges which are only for wildlife to cross the road so they don't get killed on the road. You have tunnels for frogs and other things so they can get under the road. This is what is really, really important. I haven't said I'm against autonomous driving, and I'm glad there's brave enough people who would jump into an autonomous driving car in Malaysia. So I'm not an early adopter on that one, given the driving practices, and that's not offensive, it's a reality. But I mean, there's a lot we can actually do. I think the most important bit is really embedding us into the nature, you know, like letting plants grow up on buildings and so on. There's a lot which can be done right, but there's also a lot which can go wrong. There's this building which looks like a durian in Singapore. And it's a very highly energy efficient building with all these panels and so on. But what they didn't think about is they didn't think about the total costs. The cleaning costs of each of those panels, I think, is $200 per year. And they have many, many panels on this building. So, you know, when you play with environment, when you try to embed, you really need to think consequentially. What is the end-to-end cost? And that was said by one of my, I think it was, I can't remember, somebody said that you need to really think of the end-to-end energy balance and the implications of everything you're doing. Thank you.
Arina, you want to? Yep.
Yeah, so I think I still come back to measurement, having clarity on a measurement and progress. So I do believe that once the emissions is being sorted, biodiversity is coming next, but some of the property leaders are already strategizing on biodiversity as we speak, given that there's also a pressure by the new generations and the customers that is also looking on this area. So quite a number of players are not going to wait further. They are also going to relook at the nature demographics. Some have already put out the IUCN red list species. Similar to, I think 2 property developer has already put out a IUCN red list species. There's pros and cons because once you put it out, people may come and, you know, poach or so on and so forth. But I think it's better to be very clear that these species are being protected in the vicinity, and the local community plus the authorities and the developer have ring fence and put in place certain level of navigation to ensure that the ecosystem thrive. So I think the thing of where the companies or corporates should be proud of is not when you hand over the property, is when after 10, 20 years later, the property is still flourishing and it is still being a proud project of the company. That's where it really demonstrates a very clear, thoughtful process in navigating the project.
Beautiful. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's hope, let's build for better tomorrow and future. Let's once again round of applause for all the 3 distinguished speakers.